VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at VCYAmerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And we thank you for joining us on Crosstalk here today on VCY America. My name is Jim Schneider, and before we introduce our guest and topic for today, just a quick follow-up to yesterday as Vic Eliason hosted the program and dealing with the Kermit Gosnell story, and also shared the news as far as President Obama speaking at the keynote address at Planned Parenthood. Well, very near the end of the program, a caller phoned in and indicated that he had just heard from the White House that the president had canceled those plans, and indeed that is the case, that President Obama has canceled his plans to deliver the keynote at Planned Parenthood's annual fundraising dinner Thursday night, tonight, citing a desire to spend more time with family of the victims and the fertilizer plant explosion. Well, Jay Carney indicated this. He's been receiving a lot of calls, a lot of pressure pertaining to Planned Parenthood and their knowledge of the Kermit Gosnell story that's going on. Now, we understand that Mr. Obama is still going to address Planned Parenthood and their supporters tomorrow morning, but has canceled his keynote at their gala. Now, we understand in the Gosnell story that the defense has rested their case, and closing arguments are set for Monday of this coming week on a huge atrocity, but that's what abortion is, and national media does not want you to know about it. Well, folks, there's another issue that you need to know about and another issue you need to take action on, as the Boy Scouts have recently released their proposed resolution to accept openly gay scouts into their program. It's a resolution that's going to be voted on by their 1,400 voting members during their 2013 National Annual Meeting that's being held May 22nd through the 24th at the Gaylord Texan Resort and Convention Center in Grapevine, Texas. Here to discuss this issue today with us, along with an update on what's happening in the homosexual activist agenda, is Peter LaBarbera, founder and president of Americans for Truth About Homosexuality. His organization is dedicated to exposing the homosexual activist agenda. Peter, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Jim. Thanks for the opportunity.
Peter, the Boy Scouts have been a stalwart of promoting traditional values, and even affirmed in the summer of 2012, this last summer, their promotion of traditional values, that they weren't going to change. Why the change that we've seen over the last few months? Why the push to incorporating homosexuality into the Boy Scouts?
Well, Jim, it's a lot of reasons. It's a huge cultural push, but I think what happened, and what a lot of my friends in the pro-family movement believe happened, is that the Boy Scouts panicked. It's a combination of having pressure points in the form of pro-homosexual CEOs who are big donors to the Scouts, for example, members of their executive council, pushing for the pro-homosexual changes, that the same change that they've made in their own corporations, and the Scouts feeling like they were going to lose more and more corporate donors. Now, the sad thing here, Jim, is the Scouts just recently, I believe last year, had come out with, they had reviewed their policy and decided that they would stick by the traditional policy of staying morally straight, not allowing openly homosexual scoutmasters or scouts, and then all of a sudden they announced that they're considering this change. And so a lot of people think that it's panic about losing these corporate gifts, but they could easily make up the money lost by those corporations by getting gifts from other corporations, or maybe just raising the scouting membership fees or something. It's just they did not have to do this, and it could ruin their organization.
Well, when their announcement came out here now just a few months ago that they were going to open their doors and have homosexual scout leaders, and also open the door to open homosexual scouts, we saw that there was a huge public backlash, Peter.
Yes, and absolutely a wonderful backlash. I don't like that word backlash, but the people of America spoke. The Scouts were ready to cave. They had this whole thing sort of worked out where these pro-homosexual CEOs, like the chairman, the CEO of AT&T and other corporations, were making this push, and the Scouts suddenly announced this. Everybody was flabbergasted. But the good news is the pressure from the grassroots America, from Eagle Scouts, from people with boys in the Scouts, forced the Scouts to then say, we will have a vote in May among our councils to see if we change this policy. Well, now, Jim, they just announced a sort of a scaled-back capitulation by which they would only allow openly homosexual scouts and not scout masters. So that's not, they're moving in our direction, but they're still going to do this capitulation, and I think they're going to lose this vote in May to the good side if they actually have the vote.
I'd like to read, Peter, the resolution that they're going to be voting on in May. At this annual meeting, so that our listeners can fully understand what it is they're voting on, because people, you need to have the understanding so that you can act accordingly. It says, whereas it is the mission of the Boy Scouts of America to prepare young people to make ethical and moral choices over their lifestyles by instilling in them the values of the Scout Oath and the Scout Law. Then they outline them. The Scout Oath: on my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country, and to obey the Scout Law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. The Scout Law: a scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. So that's the first whereas. The second, and whereas duty to God, duty to country, duty to others, and duty to oneself are each a core value and immutable tenet of the Boy Scouts of America. And whereas a Scout Oath begins with duty to God, and the Scout Law ends with the Scout's obligation to be reverent, and that will always remain a core value of the Boy Scouts of America, and the values set forth in the Scout Oath and the Law are fundamental to the Boy Scouts of America and central to teaching young people to make better choices over their lifetimes. And whereas the vision of the Boy Scouts of America is to prepare every eligible youth in America to become a responsible, participating citizen and leader who is guided by the Scout Oath and Scout Law, and whereas for more than 103 years, programs of the Boy Scouts of America have been delivered to youth members through cooperation with chartered organizations that select adult leaders who meet the organization standards as well as the leadership standards of the Boy Scouts of America. And whereas numerous independent experts have recognized that the programs protecting Scouts today, which include effective screening, education, and training, and clear policies to protect youth and provide for their privacy, are among the best in the youth-serving community. And whereas the current adult leadership standards of the Boy Scouts of America states that the applicant must possess the moral, educational, and emotional qualities that the Boy Scouts of America deems necessary to afford positive leadership to youth, the applicant must also be the correct age, subscribe to the precepts of the Declaration of Religious Principle, duty to God, and abide by the Scout Oath and the Scout Law. While the Boy BSA does not proactively inquire about sexual orientation of employees, volunteers, or members, we do not grant membership to individuals who are open or avowed homosexuals or who engage in behavior that would become a distraction to the mission of the BSA. And whereas Scouting is a youth program, and any sexual conduct, whether homosexual or heterosexual, by youth of Scouting age is contrary to the virtues of Scouting. And whereas the Boy Scouts of America does not have an agenda on the matter of sexual orientation, and resolving this complex issue is not the role of the organization, nor may any member use Scouting to promote or advance in a social or political position or agenda. And whereas youth are still developing, learning about themselves and who they are, developing their sense of right and wrong, and understanding their duty to God to live a moral life. And whereas America needs Scouting, and the organization's policies must be based on what is in the best interest of its young people, and the organization will work to stay focused on that which unites us. And whereas the Boy Scouts of America will maintain the current membership policy for all adult leaders of the Boy Scouts of America, now therefore be it resolved. Okay, here we go, folks. The following membership standard for youth members of the Boy Scouts of America is hereby adopted and approved effective January 1st, 2014. Youth membership in the Boy Scouts of America is open to all youth who meet the specific membership requirements to join the Cub Scout, Boy Scout, Varsity Scout, Sea Scout, and Venturing programs. Membership in any program of the Boy Scouts of America requires the youth member to subscribe to and abide by the values expressed in the Scout Oath and Scout Law, subscribe to and abide by the precepts of the Declaration of Religious Principle, duty to God, and demonstrate behavior that exemplifies the highest level of good conduct and respect for others, and is consistent at all times with the values expressed in the Scout Oath and Scout Law. If it stopped there, it would be fine, but here it is. No youth may be denied membership in the Boy Scouts of America on the basis of sexual orientation or preference alone. Peter, their final statement just contradicts everything that they were standing for in their whereas clauses.
It's totally incoherent, and I agree with Tony Perkins, Jim. He observed that the policy basically says homosexuality is acceptable until a boy turns 18, and then when he comes of age, he can be removed from the Scouts because it's saying adult Scouts, same policy. But now, even though it talks about still morally straight and affirming the Scout oath, it's saying that sexual orientation, which is, of course, the legal code word for homosexuality, doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, it's rather appalling. It is a double standard that's really hard to kind of figure out in this new policy, as if, Peter, they're just seeking to bring about compromise in the Scout, like, okay, maybe this will appease the homosexual activist.
But instead, Jim, it's gotten everybody upset. The homosexual activists are upset because now they're saying that homosexual adults won't be able to mentor the Scouts. This is classic doublespeak, Jim. The Scouts are trying to make an accommodation with political correctness. And if there's one thing we know about the homosexual lobby is you cannot appease it. They keep going. Remember when civil unions was going to be the compromise that was going to stop gay marriage? Yeah. Guess what? Every politician who came out for civil unions, most of them have now moved towards homosexual so-called marriage. You can't appease a movement based on sin, and so this is a complete mistake by the Scouts. And I'm hoping that this will be rejected by the Scout councils, and the Scouts will be saved in spite of their own leadership.
Zach Walls, he's an Eagle Scout, founder of Scouts for Equality, said, quote, "This is a crucial step, and Scouts for Equality will work to encourage members of the National Council to vote to approve the resolution. But we will continue to fight to push discrimination out of Scouting once and for all."
Absolutely.
So, Peter,
the homosexual lobby is always for 100% victory.
Yeah.
Our side tries to compromise, but in this instance, the Boy Scouts have shown that, they really made a treacherous move. And I think some pro-family leaders, Jim, some conservatives, some Christians have said, okay, I'm already done with the Scouts. They're so appalled that the Scouts would move in this direction. After they'd already won, let's remember, the Boy Scouts won in the U.S. Supreme Court. They won their constitutional right to live by their own standards. It was upheld by the Supreme Court. This would just lead to another court challenge, which would make the Scouts totally pro-homosexual, because once you make the compromise and say that you can have Scout kids, of course the homosexual lawyers will challenge the adults. It would completely homosexualize the Scouts. It would lead to more gay activism, and I think it would destroy the Scouts. Their numbers would begin to plummet if this were approved.
And Peter, this is exactly what you said, is when all of a sudden, okay, homosexuality is okay, but once you turn 18, all of a sudden there's a magic switch that turns and say no longer is it acceptable? I mean,
and what about morally straight, Jim?
Yeah.
I mean, the principle that the Scouts won in the Supreme Court, where they were able to live by their own moral code. Now they're basically confusing everybody by attempting this doublespeak to say, well, it's kind of our moral code. You got to adhere to it. You got to adhere to our religious standards. But we just ditched the part which we won on the Supreme Court on, by the way. It's all confusing. It will only lead to further capitulations, just as we saw with Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the military, Jim. If you look back and you say what Obama first said, we're not going to have homosexual housing, we're never going to have homosexual marriages performed on bases. All of that is being challenged and being implemented in the U.S. military. We're going to see transgender activism in the U.S. military. It's always one step at a time for the gay lobby, which is why you just have to say no to homosexuality in the Boy Scouts.
But the end goal, folks, is full conquest. We'll be back in just 60 seconds. Be ready to jot down some information, because we're going to be providing a step as to an action step, what you can do to have your voice heard on this issue. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY America Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, before the flood of Noah's day, did people live in cities?
Chris, there are a lot of things about the days before the flood that we're not told, but there are a couple of hints. Living was probably easy back then, and people could live everywhere off fruit trees or crops which would easily grow in fertile pre-flood soil. We're told that people grew crops and kept flocks before the flood. We're also told that some of Cain's descendants, after he was banished from his parents' home, founded a city and lived there. One very important hint that we're also told in Genesis was that the earth was filled with violence. Therefore, it was filled with people. Thus, the flood had to be global in order to wipe them all out. Chris, the Bible doesn't give us all the details, but we find these hints when we go back to Genesis.
Thanks, Dr. Morris. If you'd like to go back to Genesis, visit us on the web at www.icr.org. That's www.icr.org.
Folks, the Boy Scouts, which have been a bastion of moral values and principle, are now proposing to throw out the words morally straight. Not the actual words, but the meaning of those words. I mean, they're still going to have those words in their oath, but the meaning will be totally distorted as the Boy Scouts seek to capitulate to allow open homosexual scouts into the scouting program. Now, Peter, activist homosexuals are promoting, on every way we turn in states and schools. They have this big promotion going on a big anti-bullying campaign to say anything against homosexuality, you're bullying. Are we not witnessing before our very eyes the same activist homosexual agenda that are seeking to bully the Boy Scouts to make this change?
Well, I think extorting might be also an appropriate word, Jim. The idea that these major corporate leaders would be, and then, homosexual activists working with corporations that have already compromised on the homosexual issue to say, withdraw the funds, and then you see this corporate pressure coming on the Scouts. What the Scouts need to do is they need to change leadership. They need to get rid of pro-homosexual leaders. Apparently, you can buy your way on to being a board member of the Scouts, so that's the way it appears anyway. Why would they allow these basically pro-gay activists to be in leadership positions in the Scouts? They need to reject this policy change, number one. Number two, they need to get rid of leaders which were espousing the change, and they need to dedicate themselves to their own morally straight policy, which means finding new donors. Maybe Chick-fil-A or somebody can step in there and say, we'll make up the losses. Maybe they can ask a little bit more from the parents, but I think parents will rally behind a morally straight policy. But if they do this change, Jim, they're going to see their membership plummet, just as it happened in Canada when Canada went pro-homosexual.
Let me ask you this, Peter, because Boy Scouts have said, well, many of the religious organizations have expressed concern over having adult gay leaders, but we're less concerned about gay youth members.
Well, I think that's illusory. I don't really think that's maybe. Of course, everybody's more afraid of adult men molesting boys. And we actually, the last time I think I was on your show, Jim, or maybe a couple times ago on Crosstalk, a man called in who had been molested as a Boy Scout, and it was striking, the comments. But we have to remember that boy-on-boy homosexual promotion is also dangerous. We don't want, I don't think any parent wants a boy coming in talking about his openly gay lifestyle. We know from homosexual activism, and I've been witnessing it for over 20 years, the sorts of things that are espoused in homosexuality are not morally straight. A lot of times you're seeing young people mimicking the sort of immoral things they see in the adult homosexual world. We simply don't want homosexuality in the Scouts in any way.
Folks, this proposed resolution is coming before the 2013 National Annual Meeting. The Boy Scouts of America are going to be meeting at the Gaylord Texan Resort and Convention Center in Grapevine, Texas. The dates of their meeting are May 22nd through the 24th, and this resolution will be voted on by their 1,400 voting members at this meeting. Now, the board of directors of the Boy Scouts have spoken as far as this is what they're proposing. I mean, corporately from a board, this is what they believe, and they're proposing this to their 1,400 voting members to take place at this annual meeting. And folks, so they have spoken. And Peter, the most effective way that people can get their voice heard on this actually is in being in contact with these 1,400 voting members, which is comprised of their local scouting chapters right in their own community.
Yes, these are the people who are going to be doing the voting, Jim.
And folks, what we've provided on our website is a link at VCYAmerica.org. VCYAmerica.org. And at the very top of the page, you're going to see there information pertaining to this very issue. There's some, you click on the detailed instructions, And what you'll be able to do is just click the link, you put in your zip code, and you will find the local council service center that is nearest you. So you just put in your zip code into the information there, and up will pop the council service center nearest you for you to contact them directly. There are multiple service centers in every single state across the nation. So find the one nearest you, or just get out your phone book and look up Boy Scouts in your community or Cub Scouts in your community. If you have chapters, contact your scout leaders that your young boys are attending their PAC meetings. If you're a parent, a grandparent, you've got children or grandchildren or other relatives in the Scouts, or if you're just concerned by the erosion of values that the National Executive Committee is proposing here, folks, it's critical to contact your local scouting chapter right in your area. So you can get out your phone book and find out who it is and where it is and what their phone number is, or go to our website, VCYAmerica.org. Click on the information, and you'll see there where you just put in your zip code, and you'll be able to find the closest scouting chapter, the local council service center that is nearest you for you to contact them. And again, that's VCYAmerica.org. It's my position, Peter, that people all across this nation need to be contacting their local chapters.
Yes, absolutely, Jim. It could not be more urgent. And again, we're saving the Scouts in spite of themselves. The leadership has capitulated, but they can be reminded that Americans do support grassroots, wholesome moral values. And so everybody needs to get involved. And the good news is, Jim, I'm hearing that even in the Northeast, which is the most liberal area, parents are supporting the traditional Scout policy. So we can win this, and we can win it big. And I think maybe that's why the Scouts are starting to move in our direction by ditching the part about the adult homosexuals. So we can win this, and we should work hard to win it.
Folks, we're going to be taking your calls on scouting here about the bottom of the hour, but there's a few other kind of related issues here that we need to bring to your attention, as there is a huge push going on for same-sex marriage. We know the issue is before our United States Supreme Court at this point. Peter, last week, just on the broad scale, last week New Zealand brought in same-sex marriage. This week, a group in New Zealand is now seeking for legal recognition of polyamorous marriage, seeking to have group marriages recognized by law, seeking plural marriage of multiple people with any kind of gender. That's the kind of slippery slope that goes on.
Absolutely, Jim. If you're going to justify homosexual so-called marriage on the basis of being recognized for who you love, then how can you say no to polyamorous, multiple partner? And so obviously there's a slippery slope, and it's happening.
Also this week, folks, France approved same-sex marriage. Let's bring it home to the United States. Lawmakers in 5 states are now considering same-sex marriage. Peter, I know you're following a lot of what's going on. Tell us about Rhode Island.
Well, Rhode Island just fell, Jim. It was a huge push, and the sad news is, and I know we were talking off air about how you've witnessed this even in Wisconsin, a few very supposedly solid pro-family legislators buckled in this campaign, this huge campaign by pro-homosexual activists. And so those buckling lawmakers led ultimately to the passage of homosexual so-called marriage in Rhode Island. And so the lesson is, even in a state like mine, Illinois, where there is a push for same-sex so-called marriage, and we think that right now we're holding it back, the homosexual side is absolutely determined to get this done. And so we need to keep following our people, keep lobbying, never let up, because the homosexual lobby can push so hard sometimes it overwhelms these legislators if they're not going to stay principled.
So, Peter, we saw that the Senate passed this in Rhode Island, 26-12. The governor has said he will sign it into law, which we understand coming up January 1st, 2014. All civil unions will become marriages in the state of Rhode Island. Illinois, you're in the heart of Illinois. Peter, what's going on there?
Well, what's going on, Jim, is I think the homosexual lobby thought they would already have a victory on same-sex so-called marriage. And, of course, it's not marriage. They can call it whatever they want, but it's not marriage. The good news here is, even though the Democrats have veto-proof majorities in the House and Senate, and there's a Democratic governor waiting to sign this bill, we've held it back. Great work by the Illinois Family Institute, National Organization for Marriage has pitched in, my group, Americans for Truth. We're all working hard, and they do not have the votes yet, and so they're not calling the bill in the House. And this is because downstate Democrats are working hard, and they do not support the agenda of the liberal Democrats running Washington that have all sold out for same-sex marriage.
But, Peter, it's just imperative that people listening in Illinois right now be in contact with their Illinois state representatives.
Absolutely. We've even seen some Republicans turn already and go the wrong way, embrace the dark side and support homosexual so-called marriage. And so we need calls. Even if you've already contacted your legislator, contact your House and Senate member again. And reaffirm your opposition. Talk to the Republican Party or Democratic Party leaders that you're in touch with. Reaffirm your support for marriage as God ordained it between one man and one woman, because the homosexual lobby is furious that in Obama's home state, Illinois, they have not got same-sex marriage yet.
Okay, let's quickly move to Minnesota, and we're conducting special programming on VCY Network today for Minnesota listeners, in that we've already run a half-hour special earlier today. It's going to air again later at 5:30 today, but Minnesota has now passed committees in both the House of Representatives and the Senate to undo their law. Right now, there is a 1997 law that defined marriage as a union between one man and one woman. There is legislation now that is seeking to undo this in the state of Minnesota to bring about same-sex weddings and same-sex marriage relationships in the state of Minnesota, as well as make gender-neutral the terms mother and father. It's appalling what's going on in Minnesota. Let me quickly encourage folk there to check out the website in Minnesota that deals with this. MinnesotaForMarriage.com will have a number of pieces of information, but you can contact senators in Minnesota, 1-888-234-1112, 1-888-234-1112, and in the House in Minnesota, 1-800-657-3550, 800-657-3550. The governor there has said he will sign it into law if it's passed by the legislature. You need to be in contact with your legislative members in the state of Minnesota. Peter, Nevada is another state where this is working on as well.
Yes, Jim, the push is the homosexual lobby is riding the media. The media, as we know, has pushed very hard. The coverage has not been fair. They're attempting to distort the support for same-sex so-called marriage. The support is not there. I don't believe the polls have changed that much. But if you listen to the media, Jim, you believe that all of a sudden Americans, including minorities, support homosexual so-called marriage, and it's simply not true.
And not only Nevada, but in Delaware as well, legislation is going forth to bring about what they call same-sex marriage. It is not, because that's an oxymoron. Marriage is between people of the opposite gender. One male and a female is marriage, and that has been our definition since the beginning of time here. Peter LaBarbera is with us. Peter, let me just also, a horrendous story that's been breaking as well about...
Can I make one more point about marriage here in Illinois, Jim?
Sure, go ahead.
When I was at a rally, which is last weekend, for and against, there was a pro-family rally sponsored by Illinois Family Institute, and then the homosexual activists came from Chicago. The homosexual activist side was mostly white. The pro-traditional marriage side was largely Latino and black, and they needed a translator. The homosexual side, pushing artificial same-sex so-called marriage, they didn't need a translator. And so here we have minorities, blacks and Latinos, support traditional marriage. So the Republican Party, if it wants to grow its membership, for example, it should not be alienating these minorities. It should be standing stronger than ever in support of real, natural, traditional marriage.
Let's open our phone lines here, folks. Let's get your perspective on this scouting matter. Are you a parent, a grandparent? Are you involved in scouting? What is your response to the new proposed resolution by the Scouts voted on in the month of May? Our number, 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829. If they allow open homosexual scouts in, will you be pulling your boys from the Boy Scouts? Let's get your reaction to these stories today. 800-733-9829. This is Crosstalk.
Have you ever had someone attempt to talk to you about the Watchtower Society or the Book of Mormon? Or perhaps a friend has told you they've started yoga and invite you to participate. You know you heard something about these religions and teachings, but never had the material in your hand to give a biblical response to their teachings. Well, now you can. Two world-renowned researchers, Dr. Ron Carlson and Ed Decker, have teamed up to write Fast Facts on False Teachings, an easy-to-use resource guide that gives you quick, clear facts about several cults and false teachings. You'll find chapters on atheism, Freemasonry, Hinduism and yoga, Islam, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormonism, and much more. Fast Facts on False Teachings is available for a donation of $16 or more by writing VCY America at 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin 53208. To make your donation by phone, call 1-800-729-9829. That's 1-800-729-9829.
You're listening to Crosstalk here on VCY America, and folks, again, the best point of action is to your local scout group, and you can obtain that information by going to your phone book and looking it up, or in this day in which, it doesn't seem we get phone books delivered anymore, you can go to our website, vcyamerica.org, and on the very top of the page, you're going to see a link that will take you there to simply put in your zip code, and you can find the local scouting chapter in your area. Peter LaBarbera is with us. Just before we go to the phones, folks, just to help you understand where this is going. Peter, there are parents right now in a certain New York community in a middle school where their young girls in middle school were actually told that they were to ask another girl for a lesbian kiss. Is that correct?
Yes, Jim, this was happening some sort of diversity policy, which is supposed to be encouraging tolerance towards homosexuality. And, you know, as we've seen, all these bullying policies, all these tolerance policies, they're really designed to promote the acceptance of homosexuality. How can you possibly justify guiding girls, telling girls to do a lesbian kiss in school? I mean, this is outrageous, and the administrator of one of the administrators of the school, I believe, Jim, attempted to justify this.
Peter, this is an appalling story. It's on WND. It's also here it came through the Christian News Network as well. Middle school girls forced to ask classmates for a lesbian kiss during an anti-bullying presentation. And the story comes out of Red Hook, New York, at the Red Hook Central Schools. By the way, if you want to contact them, WND gave a phone number of 845-758-2241 as a point of contact there, but it's appalling. And Peter, that's why we sound the alarm with the Boy Scouts, because first of all, we say this is acceptable in the schools, and it leads from one thing to another. And the same thing, how long will it be before in the Boy Scouts, all of a sudden they open their manuals, or they bring in the special speakers and say, well, let's do a homosexual kiss now in the name of diversity?
Absolutely, Jim. I'm reading from the WorldNet Daily story right now. It says the students were introduced to terms such as pansexual, genderqueer. Genderqueer is this radical idea that you can be whatever gender you're feeling like, you know, you're different genders. Actually telling kids to engage in homosexual behavior or ask about engaging in homosexual behavior in the name of tolerance just shows where it all goes. Ultimately, to behavior, Jim, it's always something more radical, and you have to be pro-homosexual to be tolerant these days. And so public schools are abusing their role. Instead of teaching the basics, they're getting into these politically correct topics, and now they're promoting homosexuality in the name of stopping bullying. You can be against bullying, enact policies against bullying without promoting homosexuality. But the homosexual activists and the liberals are using the bullying as a sort of as a way to bring pro-homosexual instruction into schools. That's what's happening. Let's
go to Lubbock, Texas. Ian, you're on the air.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on, you said that...
Go ahead, Ian, you're on the air.
Yeah, you said that marriage was always between a man and a woman, but I just wanted to correct you and say that wasn't true.
No, that's how God established it, Ian. Go back to Genesis. Genesis, we find that God established marriage between one man and one woman. He reaffirmed that in the book of Matthew as well. Peter, we've known that since the beginning of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And homosexual activists have tried to promote the idea that somehow there was an exception and there were homosexual ceremonies going way back. But marriage has always been between man and woman. Actually, Jim, as bad as it is, polygamy would have a greater claim to legitimacy than homosexual so-called marriage.
Yeah, but God never sanctioned polygamy.
Absolutely.
But just to push your curriculum a little more, for
what do you mean our curriculum?
Your Christian agenda, to make it acceptable for everyone, and even agnostics and atheists. I think that there will have to be some kind of acceptance towards these things, because you can't not believe in something that is already happening. It's true. It's real.
Well, no, it's a misnomer. It's an oxymoron to say homosexual marriage. Marriage, as defined since the beginning of time, is between a man and a woman. And so what they're seeking to do, Ian, is to change the very definition of what it is. But truth is still truth regardless. Al, you're next in Cook, Minnesota. You're on the air.
Hello. I just first of all want to thank you for bringing all these issues out to light. And I am an Eagle Scout. And first of all, I want to talk about what's going on with the Boy Scouts and their views. I have two other brothers who are Eagle Scouts, and I personally find this appalling. I know they do the same, and it's just hard to believe that they have all these protection laws about child protection safety that you have to go through as adults, and trying to keep all the children safe. And when I turned 18, they wanted me to take this child protection source, and you'd have to read it, and then you'd have to do that just to protect. And I personally don't see how this is going to protect anybody when you have gay kids sleeping with another kid. It's just it's just insane. I find that appalling.
Al, are you still involved with scouting at all?
I am a little bit. I was an Eagle Scout in December, and I turned 18, so I'm still a little bit involved with our troop here in Cook. So I know most of all the names of all the Boy Scout people and leaders in this area. Mm-hmm. So I am still a little bit involved. Great.
We'd certainly encourage you to be in contact with them regarding your views on the issue.
I will do that. And also I have something to say about this, the Minnesota and their voting that. We had a couple of friends, and a lot of pastors went down to talk to our members in politics down there, and they went and talked, and they actually were able to see these people. And in particular, they went down and saw Jason Metza. I can't remember what he's in, either the House, Senate, or something like that. But they had told him and reasoned with him, and after they had stated why they view this as wrong, he gave this whole sad story about how he has family members that are gay, and that how can we take away their right if they want happiness and all that sort of thing. And so it's just, they're not really open to reason. It's just crazy.
Thank you for your comments here, Al.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Certainly that contact with legislators, Peter, important, and especially in these states that are looking at redefining, giving a whole brand new definition to what marriage is.
Yes, Jim, and to answer what the legislators' objection, just because you know somebody who has a problem doesn't mean that you have to embrace that problem or celebrate it. Because you know somebody who has struggles with homosexuality, this is what Senator Portman did in Ohio, then coming out for homosexual marriage is illogical. What if his son said he was an alcoholic? Would Senator Portman then say, well, I'm going to send you a bottle of scotch every month? Homosexuality, this is the sort of manipulative program that the homosexual activists have espoused. If you know somebody, tell them that's quote gay, tell them, and they'll be less likely to oppose gay marriage. This is what's happening, and we have to return to basic logic. If you really love somebody, you tell them the truth, which is people can leave homosexuality. I know many people who once said they were gay who are now living lives that are honoring to God. So homosexuality is not some sort of born that way lifetime condition. It's behavior that can be changed.
To Mobile, Alabama. Robert, you're on the air.
Yes, so I'd like to comment on the Boy Scouts as well as same-sex marriage. Hello?
Robert, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Okay. Boy Scouts, no, that's 100% correct what y'all are saying, because I know me and my wife's been married 10 years, and thank God we don't have kids, because I wouldn't want one in this world anyways. But
let me
if I did have a kid, ain't no way I would want anybody looking over them thinking, oh, I like that boy. I wouldn't like that at all. So they need to actually stand behind what God allowed them to be.
Keep in mind, Robert, though, that children are indeed a blessing from the Lord, and certainly He calls men blessed whose quiver is full of them. So, there are families who look at having children as a means to further their Christian values as well.
Yeah, don't be intimidated by the world. Still have those kids. We need kids in this world raised in wholesome families.
Mm-hmm. Robert, you had a second point there.
The Bible also says, "Blessed is the woman that don't go into labor too." So, unfortunately, my wife is unable to have them. So I guess she's part of the Bible. She's blessed.
Yeah, I'm not criticizing that, Robert. It's as the mandate went forth to be fruitful and multiply, and certainly God has His hand upon each one. But to purposely seek not to have children, one would have to evaluate that. But let's go ahead to your second point.
Okay, the second point is the United States, excuse the language, but they have got stupid. God, 2 times already, Himself has destroyed the world due to immorality of all moral laws by Him. Sodom and Gomorrah and the days of Noah. As I recall, in both of them, it was stated that the sexual rampage is unbelievable as well as other things.
Yeah. Good point. We know, Peter, that even as our own U.S. Supreme Court is covering this issue, that the Lord's judgment has been very clear through history as to His just seeing this sin of homosexuality as an abomination in His sight.
Yes, and imagine attaching it to something as noble that God created as marriage, Jim. I'm afraid that if we continue this, America will be judged, or perhaps we are being judged by God just allowing us to pursue our own desires, because homosexuality and sexual immorality in general brings about the decline of civilizations. It has in the past, and America will not be exempt just because we're the United States of America. We, too, will be judged if we rush forward with sexual immorality.
To Olney, Illinois. Dorothy, you're on the air.
Yes. The Bible, God Himself, if you read Romans in the first chapter, it's not about from 20 to about 40, it's just a short chapter. God Himself condemned and set aside, threw them out because of homosexuality. God did not approve of it. He just threw them out. It's just like they're going to go to hell. And this is supposed to be a Christian country. We got the gall to call ourselves Christians. Unless we keep one man and one woman and make that the law of the land all over the whole country, we're going to be no country at all, because it's been quoted many times as when we just won't live under God's rules, well then a country that refuses to do that shortly goes under. And we're having trouble in this country in everything. We can't have work, we can't have jobs, all the states are broke, and if we aren't smart enough to see God is letting us know that we are thumbing our nose at Him because He turned away, like I said in Romans, first chapter, He condemns it, and they're all going to hell. He's just turned them over and doesn't want anything to do with them, so they're not going to be in heaven.
Peter, your thoughts?
Well, when she said thumbing our nose at God, I mean, that's true. We think we're smarter than God somehow, that somehow we can make an accommodation with homosexuality when God says clearly it's an abomination, it's detestable, homosexual behavior in God's sight. And so I really fear for this country because so many people, even some Christians, Jim, like who's the guy who just came out, Jim Wallace, who calls himself an evangelical Christian, came out for homosexual so-called marriage. We're really tempting God's judgment on our own country.
Our number is 800-733-9829. More calls after the break. This is Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website's worldviewweekend.com. We're continuing our series on a biblical worldview and money, 20 points. We're on point number 8 today. A wise man does not trust in riches. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17 speaks to this. Now, as we've explained, there's nothing wrong with money or having money. It's really neutral. It's not money that's the root of all evil. It's the love of money. And we don't place our trust in our money. We place our trust in the Lord Jesus Christ alone. Number 9, a wise man understands that real money is gold and silver, and God owns it all. Haggai 2 verse 8 speaks to this. A wise man understands that real money is something that has intrinsic value, not a fiat paper currency that can be inflated at the whim of the politicians and the central bankers. So a godly man or a wise man understands what is of real value, what's a real hard asset, and they have diversification. The Bible speaks to that as well. We'll continue on our next program.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America, and folks, despite the fact that the Scout Oath calls for boys to be morally straight, the National Executive Committee of the Boy Scouts are proposing a motion to allow openly homosexual boys to join the Scouts for the first time in Scouting history. Now, we have on our website a point of contact for the Scouts to contact your local chapters of the Scouts, because 1,400 voting members approximately have the opportunity, as they come to their national annual meetings being held May 22nd through the 24th in Grapevine, Texas, will be voting on this proposed resolution coming from the National Executive Committee of the Boy Scouts. If you go to our website, VCYAmerica.org, at the top of the page, you'll find the information where you can simply click on it and find the local Scouting Council Service Center nearest you. You can also go to your phone book and look it up, but it's a handy tool. You put in your zip code, and just like that, your local service center will come up, and you can contact them directly. That's VCYAmerica.org, or consult your phone book. Peter LaBarbera is with us. Our lines are packed. To Oshkosh, Wisconsin we go, and Mike, you're on the air.
Hi. Well, first of all, I want to praise God for delivering me from homosexuality. And I've been married now for 23 years, and God is good. One of the things that I wanted to point out, too, though, and for people to consider, is the Boy Scouts have been already marginalized and cut off from a lot of public funding, like from United Way, because of their stand on homosexuality. And the gay agenda really has found that the buck stops here. They have a lot of money, and they're putting a lot of corporate pressure now on the Boy Scouts to buckle in. And I think we need to also consider, how can we support them, not only with our phone calls and prayer, but is there some way we can monetarily support them and help make up for the lack of funding that they're getting because of the gay pressure?
That's a good point. Peter?
Okay, well, I think two things. One, the Scouts, hopefully after they reject this policy, and I'm confident they will if there's a fair vote, they need to think how they're going to make up this money that the liberal corporations want to deny them. Maybe people like yourself, the caller, great call, by the way, and congratulations on overcoming homosexuality with God's help. Maybe we can find corporations that will replace that money. I wish that Chick-fil-A would step in right now, or Hobby Lobby, and say we will make up the funds that are cut off by these pro-homosexual companies, because it wouldn't be that hard to do. This is a needless change, a needless capitulation by the Scouts succumbing to this liberal pressure.
Mike, thanks for raising the point.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Keep in mind, folks, also, like what's happening in California. I call it bullying, because in California, legislators are passing Senate Bill 323 there that would cause groups that refuse to lift the ban, like the Boy Scouts, that they would become ineligible for nonprofit status within the state. And that type of issue also going on. Let's go to Brad in West Allis. You're on the air, Brad.
Hi, Jim. I think your guest is right. I think the Boy Scouts need Christian leadership because they don't have it now. In Proverbs, it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. That means if you want to know something, you got to start with God, and if you don't, you're reduced to foolishness. Just like the Boy Scouts. Look what they did. They won at the U.S. Supreme Court. Then they surrendered. Now they come up with this new compromise, which refutes itself because it tells you to be morally straight and then says it's okay to be morally crooked. That's irrational.
Up until age 18.
Absolutely. You cannot have a compromise between good and evil. And the Scouts are foolhardy to even try.
That's right.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Let's go to John in Elmhurst, Illinois. You're on the air.
Hey, how are you today?
Fine, thank you.
No, listen, I mean, I've been listening to a lot of this, and the really sad thing is when you think about the judgment of God that's going to come against America, when the civil magistrates of the United States of America sign off on homosexual marriage certificates or give their blessing to something that is a clear violation of the law of God, we're going to be in an absolute lot of trouble. And the people of this nation cannot just sit there idly by and be in fear of an immoral government that does something like that. Because it's almost like Larry Pratt's argument. The law of the land is the Second Amendment. That is of the land, and that's what we need to obey.
Appreciate your call here. Mark in Walla Walla, Washington, you're on the air.
Yes, we were just recently at a weekend to remember, and the statement was made there by a man that had access to a lot of historical data. He searched back through the history of the world, and there's never been a government that has lasted more than 3 generations from the point at which they advocated and okayed homosexuality.
Wow. That's startling.
Yeah,
and Jim, we've seen this from historians, including secular historians. Will Durant, the popular historian, said that America was already in decline, and he cited homosexuality to embrace, and that was way back, I think, in the 80s or maybe the 70s. So your caller is absolutely right, and it's very sad to see Christian citizens now put in, including even like in the Republican Party, being forced to choose between their faith and this political correctness. And if the Republican Party thinks the way to get ahead, to get more votes, is to sell out God, they are deeply mistaken. I think it will lead to the formation of a more wholesome, pro-family party.
Mark, thank you for raising the point here.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye now. Our final call from Oregon. Robert, you're on the air.
Yes, I have a real quick statement to make. In 1962, they took God out of schools, correct? Well, now in Romans chapter 1, verse 28, and to the end of the chapter, which is about 3 more verses, it states the fact is God turns them over to debased mind because they do not want to recognize God. That's where we're at right now in the United States. God's wrath is already on us.
Thank you, Robert, for your thoughts here today. Peter, a heavy issue today here on Crosstalk, but certainly one that people need to recommit in prayer, not only for this issue with the Scouts, but what's decision is pending with the U.S. Supreme Court, but it is prayer, and then it's also putting feet to our prayers by making those contacts to the Scouts as well.
Yes, and some good news is that people are fighting back. Here in Illinois, the Democrats and the homosexual activists thought they would already have so-called same-sex marriage, but we've pushed it back. In the Scouts, there's pushback, so we need to keep on fighting and praying.
Folks, again, you can go to our website, VCYAmerica.org, VCYAmerica.org. You'll find the buttons there to connect you to the local scouting chapter. And, Peter, we want to get out your website as well as you keep up to date on all the issues here that warn the family about the activist homosexual agenda.
Oh, thanks, Jim. It's Americans for Truth, all written out, FOR, AmericansForTruth.com.
Peter, thank you so much for being with us here today.
God bless, Jim.
Peter LaBarbera with us from Americans for Truth. Again, that's Americans for Truth about homosexuality, americansfortruth.org. Our website, VCYAmerica.org, where you can get your local Boy Scout contact information or look it up in your phone book and contact them here pertaining to their vote coming up during their national convention in Texas, May 22nd through the 24th. Our time is gone. Thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Take Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.